Fire! Fire! Son of a...
The 90s was a real turning point for what gaming would become, and in the context of today's video, what horror could be. After Capcom's low-budget affair Resident Evil or Biohazard became a smash hit, the sequels came calling. This of course created a franchise spanning now nearly 3 decades. Now, initially this wasn't all smooth sailing. The original version of Resident Evil 2 was completely scrapped during production, and it's a miracle that game was even finished, while Resident Evil 3 is really just an add-on to RE2 stretched into a full game. This isn't to say I'd write off RE3, that'd be bloody ridiculous, but with how their stories and design are so well intertwined, I thought it'd be fun to put them together in a review. So let's see how they hold up. Alright, get settled in, this is a classic. Yep, it's the German version. Let's make the best of it, I guess.
Resident Evil.
It all began as an ordinary day in September. An ordinary day in Raccoon City. A city controlled by Umbrella.
Alright, so our story begins with a brief introduction of Jill Valentine. After surviving the Spencer Mansion incident, she is unable to have Umbrella face any justice for their actions. Raccoon City is starting to fall to the T-Virus, and now Jill must make her last escape. The virus has spread quickly, and the authorities are unable to contain the outbreak, being completely overrun all over the city. Things for us aren't looking much better as we're blown out of our burning apartment and must make our way through the narrow streets. During a quick breather, we try to help old mate over here, but he's not having a bar of us. Instead, he decides to stay in this warehouse. Oh, fuck you then, mate. We also see a man running through the streets who we eventually catch up with. This is Brad Vickers, a member of STARS, and he ain't looking too flash. We have a brief chat and he warns us about someone in town who is after all the remaining STARS members, but for some reason won't elaborate further. Like, mate, some info would be really fucking helpful right now. Anyway, he runs off and we're back to dodging anything we can in the streets until we finally make it to the police station where we meet the guy who he was warning us about.
Jill!
Brad!
We've gotta... Jill! Help! No!
The whole opening section of this game is so awesome, and the introduction of Nemesis is iconic. Now here we're introduced to a new choice selection system in the game, and in this instance we decide to flee into the station and leave the fight for another time. Things in here aren't any better though, and we have to desperately make our way up through to the STARS office. We pick up a few essentials, but before leaving we overhear someone on the radio named Carlos calling out for help. We quickly make our way towards the entrance with Nemesis back on our tail, and this guy's quick. Eventually we run into this Carlos bloke, who is apparently with Umbrella. We aren't impressed, but he says he's here to save civilians. Our chat is interrupted by our new best mate though, however he seems to be weak to explosions. Carlos wants to help us out, so we go meet his team at the tram. Over there we meet this guy named Nikolai, who's sus as fuck, and another pretty wounded fella named Mikhail. He doesn't look like he'll be much use, and Nikolai doesn't seem to like us much, but fuck that guy. We need to get this tram going so we can make our way through the city to a helicopter.
The main problem we have is that the landing zone is cut off from here by the fire. So we have no choice but to use this cable car to navigate through it. Fortunately, we can also use it as a moving shield to get us through the worst areas.
Now, I'm not exactly swimming in ammo at this point, and there's a lot of zombies in these tight streets, but we push through as best we can. After picking up some oil at the petrol station, a spark sets off an explosion that we're lucky to get out alive from. I'd say I wish the DeLorean survived, but it probably runs just as well blown up. Anyway, we get this battery, fuck up whatever the fuck these dudes are, and catch this elevator to this other area so we can score this Magnum at another part for the tram. Crowds are tight, so we have to improvise a bit, because fuck trying that dodge maneuver. Mikhail seems to be alright to fight for a moment, and then he heads back to bed. Oh, and apparently my oil isn't good enough, so I guess I have to go back out and find that shit. And just ignore the fact that for some fucking reason my capture card decided to change everything to widescreen even though I didn't change anything. In this office, we find Nikolai being a bit dodgy, killing blokes who aren't zombies, but while we finally get the oil in the chemical room, zombies start pouring in. We assume Nikolai is being killed, and given how tight we are in ammo, we're lucky to get out alive. Nemesis is hot on our tail as we make our way back to the tram, and to make matters worse, we have to escape this giant worm after being pulled underground. This is pretty easy, but I doubt it's the last we'll see of him. We get the tram up and running, but we have to deal with a non-paying customer first. This is going well enough, but he won't stay down. Mikhail tells us to leave as he takes on Nemesis himself, taking his own life and blowing Nemesis out of the tram. This is of course going to cause us to crash, and now we're at the clock tower. Here we're able to resupply ourselves before having a yarn with Carlos, where we tell him to stop being such a little bitch. After dealing with a few spiders, we meet up with Nemesis at the clock, who doesn't seem too happy, but we manage to put him down long enough to escape. Of course, he does insist on chasing us through the building though. We manage to get the clock tower up and running, but once the helicopter shows up to save us, things take a mean twist. Nemesis manages to hit us, but Carlos comes in attempting to save the day. He's quickly taken out, and we are forced to take on Nemesis while poisoned. Now this battle is tight, and it's pretty easy for him to get his hands on you, so you need to make sure you've got some health items saved up for this one. With plenty of grenade rounds, he goes down, but things aren't looking too good for us, as we collapse while Carlos lays unconscious. Now while the overlapping can be a little hazy, this is where another character's story begins. While Jill is down and out, we cut to another character's story, with Claire Redfield arriving in Raccoon City. While we're having a look about, we briefly see a truck driver leaving a petrol station with a bloody arm, seemingly after having some sort of altercation with a stranger. Cutting back to Claire, we enter a diner and spot this bloke chowing down on someone. Us not being the type to interrupt someone's meal, we insist on leaving, but more zombies are appearing outside. Making it to the door, we run into a police officer who helps us get out of the diner. Now, our new cop mate, Leon Kennedy, is meant to be on his first day on the job, while we're in town looking for our brother Chris, who we've lost contact with.
Yeah, first day on the job. Great, huh? Name's Leon Kennedy. Nice to meet you.
Mine's Claire. Claire Redfield.
As we're making our way further into the city, a zombie tries to attack us from the back seat, causing us to crash. We can't stop for long though, as the truck driver from earlier crashes into the car, separating us. Before leaving, we agree to meet at the police station, and here's where the second game starts.
Head to the station. I'll meet you there.
Okay.
Both games really do have awesome openings. You could pick either one as a favourite. We desperately make our way through the streets, finding ourselves in a gun store. The owner, Kendo, is initially defensive, but lets us hang around. We grab some pistol ammo, but quickly the store becomes overrun with zombies crashing through the door. Like, really mate, you're the gun store owner and you have no barricade up. This is totally your fault. Anyway, we get running through the back streets and eventually make it to the entrance of the police station, where for a short time we can catch our breath and figure out what's next. In the first room we're able to enter, we find a cop, Marvin, who tells us that every STARS team member, including our brother Chris, has gone missing. He goes on to describe the mansion incident and Umbrella being involved.
Chris and the other STARS members discovered that Umbrella was behind everything, at the risk of their own lives, but no one believed them.
Using the key from Marvin, we start to make our way through the station, and this place is packed with the undead, as well as some other hideous monsters, which we can thankfully run away from easily enough. We eventually make it to the STARS office, where we pick up a grenade launcher, as well as Chris's diary, which explains the lack of hard evidence of Umbrella's shady shit due to the mansion blowing up. Barry also found out they were starting research on a T-virus variant, the G-virus, and they've decided to head to the Umbrella HQ in Europe without telling us due to fear of our safety. Before we leave, we take this unicorn thingo, some film from Wesker's desk for entertainment behind the bushes later, and a random fax sent to Chris, telling us that the police chief is a bit of a shit bloke, covering up shady shit and dodging his own charges. We've got to carry on though, using the unicorn hockey puck to get this key along the way. Upstairs we see a girl running away from a zombie, but when we run after her, instead we find Leon, who thankfully made it to the station. He spotted the girl too, but made no efforts to stop her. Anyway, we have a quick yarn, tell him we'll go after her, and he gives us this radio to keep in touch. By now we're really starting to open up the station, making it easier to get around. We find this helicopter on fire, blocking our way through, so we blow up this water tank to put it out. After that's out of the way, we hear a lady screaming, but to get through there, we need some explosives. Good thing they just leave this shit lying around. Oh hey, Marvin's dead. Thank you. Now we get to blow up the helicopter and run into Chief Irons, and that must be the lady who screamed before. Alright, this guy's pretty unhinged, so we're just gonna let him be. Thankfully the little girl from earlier is in one of the next rooms.
Leon, come in.
Hello. Frank Walker from National Tiles.
We let Leon know we've got the girl, Sherry, but after she tells us both her parents work for Umbrella, she gets spooked by a monster, seemingly after her, causing her to fucking run away again. Back in the Chief's office, we find another key, as well as some strange shit on the wall for some key objects. Good thing I already had half of one of them and the other two from my travels. We run along to try and find Sherry. Eventually we find her way down under the station and she runs off again, which is followed by a small section where we run around to Sherry, do a little puzzle, get another key for Claire, and then we have to chuck it back to her because we can't climb back over. Back as Claire, we get this side pack and a machine gun, cause fuck it, Leon can handle himself. And after plenty of running around, we do this other puzzle to get this cog, which we take up to the clock tower so we can turn that on and open this door and finally get the second half of this fucking thing and head back to Iron's office. Here we find Sherry, but we head in solo first, to suss things out. We follow the sound of Iron's screams, and when we confront him, we confirm that he's been working with Umbrella and knows about the G-Virus.
In case you haven't already figured it out, the monster that's been tearing my precinct apart is yet another product of the G-Virus.
Nah, this is Claire. Hey, mate, I haven't seen that, sorry. Anyway, he suffers a horrible death, and down the ladder we face off with the bloke who got him, which ends up going pretty smoothly with the help of the machine gun. Alright, now, fucking no running off this time, alright? Oh, get fucked. So after a quick Sherry section, she manages to hurt herself with the monster nearby, and we're back to trying to save her again. While making our way through the sewer, we run into Sherry's mother, Annette, who tells us that her husband William is infected with the G-Virus after being attacked by some Umbrella dudes. I don't know, I fucking care. His intention is to infect Sherry, so we've got to go find her. After a slight setback with having to deal with this alligator, we find Sherry, who's a bit crook, so we have to take her to this cable car and get her down to the lab. Her condition is getting worse, and William eventually shows up for a quick fight, but it's nothing a few grenades can't handle. And after that, we put Sherry in a safe space so we can go find what we need in the lab. Things aren't looking too flash down here, and eventually Annette shows back up. She's mad at us for apparently killing her husband and has another G sample. William is in fact not dead, however, and shows up to kill Annette. Oh, that's what you fucking get, mate. She at least provided us with some info to make a vaccine. Oh, Leon's down here too. Now, the self-destruct sequence is kicked well into gear at this point, but near the final elevator, William shows up for one last showdown. It's a tense battle. Well, not really, I saved up so much ammo at this point, but anyway, we put him down with a bunch of grenades and we run to the train where Leon is with Sherry, while the base is blowing up. Thankfully, the vaccine works, and we make our way to safety.
It's over.
No. I have to find my brother.
You're right. This is just the beginning.
Now back in Raccoon City, we still have another story to conclude, as Carlos wakes to find Jill down and out. We'll leave her in a safe place while we take a trip to the hospital to find her a vaccine. Things there are even worse though, and now we're reintroduced to a familiar foe. Along the way, we find Nikolai killing his own men once again, but before we can confront him, the victim pulls out a grenade, and out the window he goes. Now this place is total chaos, and we have to be careful not to waste all of our machine gun ammo. After a quick puzzle, we get what we need, run away from the hospital that Nikolai planted explosives in and dodge Nemesis all the way back to Jill. The vaccine works, and after telling us Nemesis is still around and Nikolai is a shit bloke, Carlos ends up running off again while we head to the park.
I don't know how, but I do know that he is our enemy. Remember, don't trust him.
Whatever he's up to would want to be bloody important to just fuck off again. Now, the park isn't exactly safe at this time of night, and as we're searching for a key to get through this gate that we could have just shot the lock off of, Nikolai shows up again to tell us how much of a shit bloke he is, like we didn't already know. That doesn't sound good. This guy's back, and damn he's tough, but luckily we've got a few magnum rounds with his name on it. On our way out of the park, we give Nemesis the old left-right goodnight before meeting up with Carlos in the factory, and he's got some bad news for us.
They're planning on launching a missile directly into the city as soon as day breaks. The explosion will be powerful enough to destroy everything.
Are you sure about that?
Positive. I heard it straight from a supervisor.
They'll go this far to cover their tracks?
Time isn't on our side, which is probably why it's bad this puzzle took me like 20 fucking minutes to solve. But anyway, we run into Nikolai, who's put a few gunshots our way before having what would be his last bad guy speech. We move past Nikolai's corpse, only to be locked in the treatment room with Nemesis. This is a tough battle and he just keeps coming until we lay enough into him to grab a keycard that will get us out of there. In the radio room, Carlos tells us that the nuke is on its way, but Nemesis keeps finding us. He mutates further after feeding off a tyrant corpse, and the only way we can bring him down for the last time is with this giant railgun. We lead him around the room into the firing line a few times, and once that's out of the way, we finish him off once and for all.
You want stars? I'll give you stars.
Waiting outside is Carlos. We make it out of the city just in time.
That's it. I've had it. This time they've gone too far.
Yeah, I love this story. I didn't really know what it was going to be like blending these two games together, but it was actually a lot of fun, and even with the remakes existing, I love coming back to these games and just having fun with their story, and I don't know, let's see how the gameplay holds up. The original Resident Evil was a fun, low-budget affair, and as expected, the sequels improve on the original in a number of ways. Starting off with the second game, what's immediately noticeable is the improvement of the graphics. The original has its charm and is effective enough in what it's going for, but the release of Resident Evil 2 showed how much more was possible. The models are a big jump in quality, and while there are still limitations of it being a PS1 game, the more time spent on things like character models, enemies, and backgrounds provides a far more polished looking game, which of course is carried over into its sequel. We're still rolling with pre-rendered backgrounds here, but they're so much better here, and it's that much more immersive running around in these super detailed backgrounds. They're just a treat. There's just so much going on in these environments, and the way that they use these backgrounds to tell a story in these different areas really helps you craft an idea in your head of what could have possibly gone down as these people were desperately fighting an onslaught of the undead. Of course, the Dreamcast port offers its own little improvements with far better resolution, cleaner models, and the CGI cutscenes are rendered at a much higher quality. It's just a shame that the backgrounds couldn't be improved to really take advantage of the system. It's just something that kind of sticks when you're just porting up from a PS1 game with elements hardwired in, but at least we get some cool features like the health bar on the VMU. Overall, I'd probably say the cutscenes show the most noticeable leap as far as budget is concerned. These scenes flow well, and while they may be quite dated, they are still effective in telling a story, and I still love them all these years later. The map, as well as the setting, shows a noticeable improvement from the original two as the ways of getting around and unlocking areas becomes more ambitious. We're dealing with a pretty big area here, and the simplicity of the first game clearly wasn't going to cut it this second time around. Puzzles are back in a big way, but I really wouldn't say anything in RE2 is all that difficult, not compared to the third game at least, but we'll get to that. You will find yourself needing plenty of key items to progress, and with keys themselves, the game will colour the doors on the map to show you what key will open where. This is super helpful and won't have you just running around to different areas wasting a bunch of time because you forgot which key the game told you would open whatever door. It's a welcome addition and helps keep the game tight. Even lockpicking is back, with Claire being our new master of unlocking. You'll be given a lockpick at the start of the game and it'll help you get into some drawers here and there so you can grab some much needed ammo. And one of the biggest improvements is of course the voice acting, which had a habit of getting better in each sequel. So, as we know, it's hard to improve on perfection, like what we had in the original game, but Resident Evil 2 takes a few steps in the right direction for a game wanting to be taken a little more seriously.
Just look at her. She was a true beauty. Her skin nothing short of perfection.
While the unintentional hilarity is gone, what it's replaced with is a far more admirable effort to place us with characters trying a little harder to sell the story. It's far from perfect, sure, and the cheese and sometimes stiff delivery remains, but at least people sound like they had at least some direction. Here we get more depth to the characters, with a more ambitious story and a decent effort to both tie characters together in this game as well as tie characters to the events of the original. It's really a classic fun story, and you can see why people were pushing for a remake for so long after the first game got such good treatment a mere 6 years after release. Now, obviously something I didn't cover in the story section is Leon's story. I chose Claire's as it ties in better to the first and Code Veronica, but Leon's character is one of the most beloved in the series. A rookie cop coming in and facing unspeakable horrors on his first day is a classic, and really, you're safe choosing either story. The events are slightly different with Ada and all that, and obviously the B story for either character will have you being chased around by Mr. X, which I thought I had a save file for and I was going to use instead, but that plan went out the window, and oh well, at least Nemesis will make up for that. Oh yeah, we miss out on the actual final boss fight in the train, but don't worry, it all worked out. Everybody lived. So when it comes to gameplay, these old Resident Evil games can be pretty stubborn, but that's not to say they're unplayable. Obviously, we're still rolling with tank controls here, and as always, they work perfectly fine with these types of games being mostly well designed around them. Combat works with the lock-on system, and overall, I can't really find anything too bad with it. Just quickly though, one thing that fucked me off was Sherry constantly stopping if you're too far away from her. I never complained about Ashley in 4, but Sherry here can be an absolute pain. Anyway, our favourite zombies are back, and better than ever, with more on screen causing headaches and far less predictable movement. They don't just kinda drift off the same way, so it's not as straightforward evading them. On top of that, we get the zombie dogs back, and they're still as easy as ever to deal with, and the crows are back, and they're still as annoying as they were in the first game. I always found them to be more annoying than menacing. I'm sure a few will agree with that. Now, we do get some new enemies. The plant monsters in the lab are pretty cool and are fun to take down with some heavy weapons, but they are way overshadowed by the lickers. These are one of the most popular enemy types to come out of this series as a whole, and part of that would be because of the movies, as hard as that is to admit. All of these nasty buggers can be taken down with a number of weapons, with Claire getting her own variety of tools of death. It's pretty standard affair with a knife, pistol, grenade launcher, etc., but the crossbow is a pretty decent new one, and the machine gun is always good for desperate encounters. The spark shot is kinda just that weapon that I played around with a couple of times, then let it rot in the item box, and the knife I didn't really bother with much either, but if you're playing as Leon, you'll get a slightly different weapon list too, but Claire's list is overall pretty cool. In this game I was never really desperate for ammo. If you're careful enough, you'll always be confident going into situations where you know you'll need to clear a room, and in turn the boss fights never really caused any issues. I just played this one on the standard difficulty, so I didn't really have a super tough time with the bosses, and really I probably should have bumped it up because I was just hoarding health items. Still, there was some challenge here and there, and it's still a great time. Now I've been sucking this game off a bit, so let's see what RE3 brings to the table and see if it stands on its own. One thing to get out of the way is the fact that this is a censored version of the game, and obviously I'm not going to judge the game as a whole for the letdown that can be brought along with that. With that out of the way, Resident Evil 3 does do a few things differently. In many ways it still feels like the add-on that it was initially meant to be, but the team behind it clearly put some effort in to give it some real value. I mean, we're not going to be getting any improvements in graphics or anything like that, but hey, what do you expect, a next-gen sequel or something? The most welcome addition is the kick turn. No longer shall you be forced to turn around slowly like a chump, because Jill has the ability to do that shit quickly now. Must be all that STARS training. She probably should have hung around more for the dodge training though, because the implementation of the dodge move could have been brilliant, but for me it was always done as an accident. I didn't even bother trying to get good at it, because it's just too finicky, but at least we can run up and down stairs now, I guess. On the plus side, the ammo crafting in this game is a very welcome addition, and helped keep things fresh. You'll have the crafting ability straight away, and depending on your combination of powders, you can make varying amounts of ammo on the go. This, along with the extended weapons list, makes things feel more action-y, which was one of the main things people brought up when comparing it to the first two games. Here I chose the hard mode, with ammo getting really tight in areas, and I felt such a relief walking into a room full of gunpowder. Later on things get pretty action-heavy, but the tension was pretty strong when I was down to 3 grenade rounds and nothing else. The streets are tight, so getting around zombies can be tough. At least the dogs and birds aren't too much of a threat, but we do get the return of some spiders, as well as these cool spider-like monsters. The legendary hunters are back from the first game, which is also a nice touch. Now, some situations will force you into making some quick decisions, often involving Nemesis. This quick choice mechanic was a really neat idea, and it would have been cool if they put that in the remake instead of rushing that game out the door. I had to run away from Nemesis early as I had no ammo, but that won't necessarily stop him from coming after you. This aspect of the game really keeps you moving, as this guy is quick and will follow you from room to room until you reach another area. It is all scripted as to where he'll show up, but that doesn't stop him from being a terrifying presence. His boss fights can be pretty tough too. I had a way harder time putting this guy down than I did with any of RE2's bosses. That can describe most of my time with RE3 though. I went with the harder difficulty and I got it. It doesn't change the puzzles, but even then they were noticeably more difficult this time around as well, and that's not a complaint either. I enjoyed the challenge. Lastly, as far as extras go, both games you will have a battle mode, or mercenaries mode. This is a cool little extra game that a lot of people are pretty fond of. I don't really play these, but I do have a lot of fun with them from time to time. Both games are pretty standard affair with their costumes. RE2 has a really cool gallery mode, and the Dreamcast port offers more options for versions of the game to play, but RE3 is a little bit more plain than that. They both are really cool upgrades on the PS1 versions though. Anyway, let's wrap these classics up with my final thoughts. These games are both great, and even after all these years and remakes later, you can see what effect that these games had not only on this series, but on horror gaming as a whole. Resident Evil 2 is clearly the main standout of the two over the years, being the perfect RE game in a lot of fans' eyes. While RE3 doesn't quite live up to its predecessor, it's undeniably a fun ride on its own, and earns its place with the other classic mainline titles. I'll start by giving RE2 a 9 out of 10, and as for RE3, I'd probably go with an 8 out of 10. I mean, I had a blast with both games, and if you're alright with the old game design, I recommend giving them a go. Anyway, that's all from me today. I'll catch you next time.